This is a great turnout. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Venus Libido, if you don't know who I am, and this is the lovely Honey.
Hello.
We'll introduce you in a second. But so my name's Venus, and this is called Private Parts, this show. So those of you who don't know Private Parts, I made a mini TV series in 2019, just before COVID. All about sex, dating, relationships, better understanding our bodies and better understanding ourselves when it comes to the do's and don'ts when it comes to dating. And we had the wonderful Kenny on the show. And it was just a safe space for us to talk about sex and to have all these awkward conversations that really aren't that awkward, and we're all having them with our friends or with ourselves in the bedroom, and I just brought them to the table and to the world. And so we're going to have those conversations today with Honey. So I haven't done this since 2019, so I'm a little bit rusty, so please bear with me. And I normally do games. We normally play games with sex toys and things, but I wasn't sure how appropriate that would be.
I'm quite gutted
on such a small stage. Yeah, I'm regretting it now
because I'm vibrating off the edge of the stage. It's a bit.
And it involves lots of blow up dolls as well, and now I feel really
gutted.
Yeah,
now.
I feel bad. Everyone's missing out on the fun now. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna have to come back next year and do it again, and do it properly. But yeah, for anyone, let's talk about you for a second. Tell people about you, where you come from.
I am Honey Ross. I am a writer and I host a podcast with the gorgeous Nadia Craddock, the genius Nadia Craddock. I kind of do a lot of work around body image, positive body image, and trying to help people feel more at home in their bodies, and just trying to make people be a little bit nicer to themselves, honestly. I think, that's kind of what I do.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why I asked you to come on today out of anybody, because I relate to your page, your social media, I relate to your content quite a lot, because like me, we both get our asses out on Instagram, show the world our bodies.
Yeah,
we're not ashamed of it. So obviously I love your content, and I love how free you are and how much you just, for me, it's like I just don't give a shit. Like I'm happy with what I look like, I'm happy with me, and I'm happy to share that with the world, and I think that's beautiful, and I find real joy in your content when I look at it with that, and
thank you.
I just think it's beautiful, so I think you're the perfect person to have on the show.
Thanks.
So I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to read the questions off my phone, so please, I've got a really bad memory and I can't remember them. The first question I think would be really great to ask you is, what was your sex ed like at school? And do you remember it? Was it beneficial? Was it awful? Tell us everything.
It's complicated because I know that some people have really lacking sex education. So in a way I was lucky that my school did offer it. We were offered it at different levels. When we were, I think, year 5, and then in sixth form again, we got it, and slightly to varying degrees. But my sex education was problematic. I mean, in the year 5 round of sex education, the boys were taken into one room to learn about masturbation, the girls were taken into another room to learn about periods, and I was like, yes, completely equivalent. Yes, like, you know what I mean? I'm always so turned on when I want my period. So it was very flawed, and I think, like most of the sex education in this country, it was flawed.
Yeah, I mean, put your hands up if you had a good sex education at school. No. There we go. That answers that question. Oh, one person.
Very happy for
really?
you. Must be nice.
And
there you go.
Which country? Which country?
Again,
There we go. That answers that question, doesn't it? I mean, it's bad, and I think for me, when I was growing up, I didn't know about LGBTQI+. I didn't know about it was okay to be gay, it was okay to be queer. Like, those sorts of things for me were important at that age, because I'm pansexual. I hadn't even heard what the word. Have you heard of the word pansexual in this room? Do we know what that means? For me, pansexual for me means I'm not attracted to someone based on their gender, so it's more about energy and connection for me, regardless of what you have between your legs. And so I hadn't heard of the word. I'm 30 this year, and I only heard of the word pansexual maybe like 4 years ago, and that's bizarre. So for my whole life, I had no idea who I was, how to call myself, what words to use, and it's very confusing.
Well, also, I think there's so much internalized shame around
Yeah.
sexuality, and I think, like, I am bisexual, but I feel like pan also applies, and I definitely agree with that. And, like, sorry, that sounded weird, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I also have considered myself pan at times.
Yeah.
But
that's the beautiful thing. It's fluid, isn't it?
It's very
It
fluid.
should be fluid.
But I had to seek out my sex education on the internet, like a lot of people, and I was lucky to go down better avenues than porn, like most people do. But like I was lucky to find sex educators on YouTube. I was lucky to find sex educators on Tumblr and give myself an alternate education around it. But I still felt immense shame around my sexuality and around my relationship to sex because it wasn't something that was being spoken about. And I think I remember watching the film But I'm a Cheerleader, and the opening is like all of these girls like going like that, and all the friends being like, oh, I would never get with a girl, like, and like the girl realizes like, oh, not everyone feels like this about women, and being like, oh shit, like, and all my friends watching it being like, yeah, it's so weird to feel that way about women, and I was like, yeah, it's so weird, like, it was awful.
The first time I realised I was not just attracted to men was when I watched Kim Possible, you know, the animated
That'll
Disney.
do it.
Anybody else relate to animated characters and finding your sexual? Yeah, I mean, that did it for me.
Oh, yeah.
So that was when I was like, oh, I think I like girls. And also animated characters, which was complicated. And
another
weird.
Conversation.
Yeah, completely. So, yeah, I mean, it's getting better. Like I'm a trained sex educator now, and the training I had is way more inclusive. They're talking about that. Children are not being separated, and the conversations are being had together. And I think it is getting better, but there's still a long way to go.
It's baby steps.
Yeah.
I even think like representation through the show Sex Education is also helping things come a long way.
Yeah.
And just like
Have you seen Sex Education, everybody? Yeah?
Fantastic.
If not, Netflix, watch Sex Education. Brilliant.
And it feels like such a kind of masterclass in like intimacy coordination, like teaching people how to have healthy communication. Like I feel like the most aspirational thing about that show is the level of communication. And you're like,
absolutely.
Damn, you talk that through. Like I truly I watch it like oof. But it's, I think things are changing slowly. It's hard to know because it's been a long time since I was at school if that's being implemented in that way. But we were talking about is it the organisation Split Banana?
Yeah.
Who do amazing work in schools and like are trying to change the conversation around sex and like, giving everyone the same sex education and just also giving people information about their bodies. I think it's like for people to be having safe and pleasurable sex, it's about being educated on what you've got going on, and then you can feel empowered in the choices you make moving forward, whatever that is. Yeah.
And I think for me, especially, and for girls growing up, I didn't feel comfortable or felt like it was okay to touch myself unless there was a man involved. And obviously that's not the right way to feel about your body, that you need somebody else there to feel pleasure. So now I do use my platform, and I know you do as well, and your podcast was sponsored by Womanizer, wasn't it?
For a very long time.
Yeah. Which is an amazing sex toy company, and I've in only the last couple of years felt confident enough to be like, I love to masturbate, and we are shouting about it more, but
I love your posts about it, and I think it's so important. Like I really think everyone should buy themselves a sex toy, go out and treat yourself. Like I think it's like it's really empowering and why aren't we investing in our happiness in that way? Invest in your pleasure, invest in your happiness. I definitely, when I kind of started having kind of advocacy conversations and like talking about sex education, it was when I was with the Pink Protest, and we did Girls Wank 2, which I feel like we wouldn't go for that name now, but it happened. But like it was really interesting because we got this big room together of predominantly women, and it was the most unifying thing was everyone felt shame around masturbation. And I'm like, also don't know a single person who doesn't masturbate. I'm sure they're out there, but like it's just such a strange thing of like something that has so many health benefits, mental health benefits, physical health benefits, and most people do it. It's so bizarre to me that we've still got this internalized shame and we're frightened to talk about it.
Yeah, I completely agree.
It's natural, it's healthy.
Yeah. And I think, and the thing is, like, when people say to me, why are you so interested in sex? I'm like, well, it is one of the biggest parts of my life.
Yeah.
It's just as big as eating and sleeping and breathing. I need, we do it to not just procreate, but like it's a huge part of like being with yourself and being with another person and being intimate, and it's just as important as everything else you do in your life. And it should be, you should celebrate it, and you should feel comfortable with it, and you should feel like you want to understand it better all the time, just as much as you understand the things you put in your body, that you eat and you drink, and making sure you good night's sleep. Like, sex is just as important as all of those other things.
Completely. And I think it's one of the few things that we expect people to kind of navigate on their own.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I find really interesting, is like, it's something that you often, you can do it on your own, but it's important that it's like we give people the tools moving forward, because I think in any sexual encounter, even with yourself or or partnered, you don't know how it's going to play out, and you don't know what it's going to be like. So all you can do is give someone the information before going into an experience like that can make it the most enjoyable, most safe, and, healthily communicated situation that it can be.
Yeah, exactly.
And I remember so much conversation we had with, it was Natalie Lee said this at the Girls Wank 2 thing, which is like, I'm going to teach my daughters to masturbate because most of the women I know, their first sexual encounters were terrible, from varying degrees of like unsafe to just like unpleasurable, and anything in between. Whereas like actually masturbating is a safe first sexual encounter where you learn to respect your body, you are in control of the situation, and you are completely safe. And I'm like, why wouldn't we be encouraging that?
Yeah, completely, 100%. It just makes complete sense when you say it out loud, doesn't it?
Yeah. But then I'm like, I know I'm going to be the mum that's like sliding the vibrator under the door. And I'm just like, come on, please, another one.
Oh, yeah, okay. I feel that. Right, so moving on to you, okay. You wrote a piece back in 2020 on the reality of dating as a plus-size woman. Can you tell us about that piece and what inspires you to write it? Because the big part about Private Parts is I want to dive into your experiences when it comes to dating and relationships. So please, let's talk about that.
I wrote the piece about dating as a fat woman because it was a conversation I was having a lot behind closed doors with my other fat friends, and it was not a conversation I was seeing anywhere else. And I think I would speak to my Finn friends and they would be horrified at the stories I was telling them of how I was treated, and similarly how my friends had been treated. And they'd be like, oh my God, really? It's like that for fat women? I'm like, yes, it's like that. And it's that complicated thing. And I wrote this in the article of like, you're fetishized, you're ignored, you're desexualized, you're hypersexualized. It's all of these, and then you're like, but somewhere in that, I'm just me. Like, I'm just me as a sexual person who is trying to, do what most people are trying to do and like date and live your life. So yeah, I just felt like it was really important to put that narrative out there. And like, I had a really wonderful response of so many fat women being like, thank you. Like, I actually feel really seen. And like, I have a lovely partner now. My boyfriend, Zane, is in the audience.
Hello.
He's wonderful.
Also, we all know your face now if you're not nice to us, so.
Yeah, right. But like, it took a long time to find the right person who was worth anything. Like, you know what I mean? I'm like, that's really mean to my exes, but like, it just felt like it was important at the time to have a conversation about the struggles of it.
Yeah. So going on to that, and if you feel comfortable to do so, can you share share some of the experiences of what happened, so people can, for me, like when it comes to Private Parts, and Kenny was a big part of this conversation, it's like really getting down to the nitty gritty of real experiences that happen, so people in this room can understand like what you went through and how that made you feel. Can you share something?
Completely. Let me just think back through the archives. So many happy memories. There was a lot of, I would find that when I go out, and I would go out with my thin friends, if a guy who was clearly interested in one of my thin friends would come up to us, it would be like I had a sheet over my head, like I was a true ghost. Like he would just not even make eye contact with me, not even acknowledge my existence, as if he were to look at me, I'd be like, are you my husband? Are you my partner? And there's a lot of that, of like people almost not giving larger women any human decency, because it was like, I don't want you to catch feelings if I look at you. I'm like, I'm really not that desperate. I get a lot of offers. Well, then that's what made it so confusing. There were some people on that end of the spectrum who were like, I don't want her to get any ideas. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there were people literally being like, I would pay to lick the folds on your stomach. And I'd be like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. But like, it's wrong with it if it's unsolicited. but and the DMs I would be getting, and I think that was the thing of like men who would see me on a night out, who would not talk to me on a night out, would then follow me, slide into my DMs and be like, hey, like what's going on?
Yeah.
And it was that thing of like, oh wow, you don't want to be seen with me, but you would like to be seen with me. You'd like to be with me in private and experience me in private. And I think it was just, not it.
How did you deal with that with your mental, like, I mean, so many questions, I just don't even know how to word it, but like how have you dealt with that, and how have you protected yourself moving forward now when those kinds of things happen to you?
I really invested in my relationship with myself. Like, genuinely, I think I put a lot of time into making me my number one person that I wanted to hang out with, it was really liberating to do that.
Yeah.
Of being like, oh, I can do all the things that I'm searching for. I think I realized, I was like, hang on, I've got needs, and I'm looking for those needs to be met. I can meet those needs myself. I think it was really coming back to that, because I think so much of my life I'd been taught, well, that was like you said, of you didn't even touch yourself, or didn't want to touch yourself unless there was a man in the context of, that situation. And I just was like, I really want to pour time and energy and love into myself and my relationship. So I would buy myself flowers once a week. I would take myself on dates. I journaled every night. This wasn't to say I'd stopped dating. I still went on dates, but I had a lot more intense boundaries, and was like, I'm just going to accept nothing less than immaculate, incredible, high standard people now. And really just was quite firm on that, because I was like, you know what, I'm fucking gorgeous. I was like,
yes, you are.
I'm not taking this shit anymore. And which is one of the reasons why I wanted to speak about it, because I was like, it's so ridiculous that all of these incredible, gorgeous women who for some reason are treated any other type of way because they're above a size 16. It's insane to me that there is anyone thinking we deserve anything less in the fucking world, because it's just ridiculous, frankly.
Yeah, I completely agree. So a couple of questions that I would ask on the normal show if I was doing it. We're going to get a bit more intimate.
Let's go.
First question, best and worst date?
Okay, best dates. Best date's probably zany. We've been talking for a really long time. I was like, it has to be. But we've been talking for a really long time, and just Zane's special. Look at him, he's special. But he came over and helped me build a garden heater. And it was so intimate and also very sexy, of does the screw go in there? I think it goes in there. Really hot. And also it was having someone do those acts of service. I was like, I think, I was so used to people not showing up and not doing things for me. And to have someone who showed up and did something and was really present, and we laughed the whole time and had a really lovely time. And it was just, it felt
under
different.
The heater and made love, yeah?
And you know what? Not far from the truth. And it was very special.
Oh, lovely. Well done you. So sorry, we're going to have to do it. Worst date.
Oh, okay. Oh, because I'm I want it to be fun. I don't want it to be depressing.
No, we've got to go there because we need to hear these stories.
Okay. Oh, you want to? I had a man on our second date call me Jew girl post-coitus.
Right.
I asked him to leave. He called me Jew girl. So we're experiencing full-on anti-Semitism in the bedroom.
Yeah.
It's never the place you want to experience it.
No.
Especially post-sex.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
And he made a joke. I think he made some reference to Jews grabbing coins. And I was like, I think you need to leave.
Yes.
And I never saw him again.
Okay, well, I'm very sorry about that. And maybe I shouldn't have asked that question.
It happens. Hey, it happens.
Okay, so moving on. What is the stupidest sex myth you believed?
I believed that the hymen needed to be popped.
Right.
And it does not need to be popped. It actually, so if you picture that this is the opening of the vagina, the hymen is actually about a crescent moon. I mean, it's different on everybody, but it's about a crescent moon. So actually, with the correct amount of arousal, there should be no blood. If you are turned on enough, your first time, you should not bleed. If anything pops, you've done it wrong. Nothing should pop the first time you have sex.
No,
and I think I hate the myth that the first time you have sex is meant to be painful. I think that upsets me deeply, because I know so many girls who went into sex so terrified of their first experience. And I'm like, this is meant to be fun. This is meant to be a nice thing that you do that makes you more connected to a person and makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And it's so many women experience pain with it. And it's just, awful.
Well, going off from that, how do you remember your first experience? How was that for you?
I mean, how do you think it was?
Well, I mean, I've asked this question to a lot of people,
Yeah.
and it goes one of both ways. So
I think it was correctly mediocre for a first experience.
okay.
It was, you know what? It's such a funny story. My friend was sleeping with this guy and he invited us to this party and we arrived and the guy wasn't even fucking there. And it was this other guy's birthday. So we turn up and we're like, okay, the fuck buddy's not even here. It's a random person's birthday. And then I'm sat down and this other boy comes up to me and he's like, hey, who are you? And I'm like, who am I? And he's like, it's my birthday. And I was like, oh God. And needless to say, we lost our virginities to each other that night within mere moments of
Lovely.
meeting.
Lovely. I forgot what my question was going to be now. So I get really invested when people tell me about their first times. I find it so fascinating.
It's a powerful story.
I've heard so many bizarre stories about bushes and playgrounds and so it wasn't that bizarre. Do you have any sexual fantasies you have yet to play out?
I'd love to take notes. I'd love to get railed in a field, in a beautiful field, in a cottagecore dress, maybe on a picnic blanket, maybe not.
Sounds lovely.
I like maybe spring, maybe summer. Why not all the seasons?
Well, at least it's going to be cheap, you know.
Yeah. I'm very easy to please.
It's a cheap date. Okay, so we cannot not talk about sex toys.
We cannot.
We both love Womanizer.
Of course.
Has anyone heard of Womanizer toys in here? Okay, if you haven't, you need to get yourself a Womanizer toy, my friends. It is fantastic. It's air technology. They do lots of amazing toys.
Suction. It's
Yeah,
wonderful.
they call it air technology, but it is suction.
Suction.
Yeah.
Air technology. I love the brand Lilo.
Lilo, yeah.
The Sona, which is the same as the Womanizer, basically.
Yeah.
Like most brands have put out their version of the suction toy. Everyone needs one. If you
Yes.
have a vagina, you need one. Like if you have a vulva. Sorry.
Okay. What are your biggest turn-ons and your biggest turn-offs?
Turn-offs is when they don't ask questions.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's like turn-ons. I don't know. I mean, like there are so many. I think like it's like kindness, someone smelling good, kissing my neck. Like there's a lot of things that get me going. It's like, you know, I'm easy to please, as I've said.
If you could have a sexual superpower, what would it be?
Maybe like. Oh God. I mean, I remember when I was a teenager, I once wished my hand vibrated. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh,
I'm like, that's pretty, like, but I'm like, I wish I had a vibrating hand. Just to make it easier.
I never really thought about that.
Right? It would be great.
Yeah.
It would be a great attachment.
That's a great answer. Okay, and if money was no object and someone was like, here you go off and do your thing, what would be your perfect sex toy? Like, what could it do? It literally could be, it could be anything.
Oh. I don't know, because I'm like, a sex toy is not going to hold me in their warm arms. You know what I mean? Like, I love a sex toy.
Well, money is no object.
Okay, money's no object.
Yeah.
But then I'm like...
And science, like, we could create you anything you wanted.
I honestly, something that would just, you know... It's so unsexy, but I'm like, something that does the job, like, quickly.
Yeah.
Like, if I could, like, I'm like, 10 minute, like, the 10-minute magic
Yeah,
box.
and then hugs you after.
And then holds me.
And then holds you.
Done. That's all I need.
I think we all need out with a bang. So I think the last question I want to ask you, and then we'll go to the audience. But what is your like number one advice? It doesn't have to be one thing; it can be a couple of things on just really loving yourself, getting to know your body. For those who are like, oh, I don't know if I want to touch myself. I'm worried. I'm scared. What is your advice?
It's a very good question. I mean, I kind of said some version of this earlier, but this is the relationship you have for the rest of your life. The one person that you will come home to every night is yourself. And I think you can put off getting to know that side of yourself, but it's only going to be harder the further down the line you get into that relationship. And you owe it to yourself to discover what your body's capable of sexually and to know what you enjoy. And like, it's very empowering to be able to be like, oh, I really know what I want in this situation. And I think, I wish more people had that.
Yeah.
So, I think my advice is like, sit with yourself and try and romance yourself, or think what it would take. And even if that's like I said, it can be buying yourself flowers, like spend a whole day romancing yourself and actually really start slowly. Like, I'm not saying like dive right in with a terrifying dildo. Like, you can really pace yourself, take yourself for dinner, light a candle, have a bath, and then have a gorgeous wank and just spend the time with yourself.
Yeah.
And like, really just treat it like you would a date.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think for me, it's I treat myself to lingerie.
Yeah.
And I think as women, we buy it for someone else when you should really be buying it for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have boxes and boxes of lingerie, and I just sit with myself and I put it on, I admire myself, and I have a wank, and it's the most beautiful thing in the world, and I highly recommend it.
It's very tender.
Yeah, it's very tender.
You don't need to recommend it to me because I do it all the
time.
I know. Preaching to the converted.
Well, thank you so much, honey.
No,
I wish I had the bloody games now. I'm so annoyed at myself. It would have been so much fun.
You have to get me on the proper show. Not that this is
yeah, bloody COVID. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask? And this is a safe space, so please, any questions? Yes. Oh, of course, you're going to ask one. Go on. Yeah, no, go on.
Oh, thank you.
So earlier you were saying around like essentially like having conversation with something that makes you feel more comfortable. Was there any specific questions that felt like I feel seen here, and especially as being a plus size or fat, actually plus size or woman, like.
No, it's a good question of like questions that made me feel seen. Of someone asking me.
That question, you're like, oh my god, like you get me. We're asking what feels like me.
I mean, it just was interesting. Of like with Zayn, it just never felt like a thing. Like it was never even a thing. And then I remember Zayn like asking me a question about my bisexuality, and it was the first time anyone I'd been with had asked me directly about my sexuality and how they could, if that was something I'd want to explore and deal with. And it was like that I felt really seen and was like, okay, you actually really care about me and my enjoyment, and that meant a lot.
Yeah.
It's just taking an interest, isn't it? And being like, I'm curious about what would make you happy.
I think someone's curiosity can be very sexy.
Completely.
When someone genuinely wants to understand you better, and especially when for me, if someone doesn't understand what pansexuality means, them just asking, saying, oh, I'm really sorry, but I don't know what this means. Can you explain it to me? That to me is sexy.
Yeah.
That to me makes me feel like, okay, you want to understand, you want to better understand it so that this relationship can be healthy from the beginning, not like halfway through or, I just think asking questions is really...
It's so vital.
Yeah.
Communication.
Yeah. Any other questions? Everyone's too... Oh, okay. Go on, Fran.
Okay, I'm a mum. I've got 3 kids. Disclaimer. What do you think are the most important things that parents should teach their children about sex?
I think it's just making sure that they know it's a conversation they can have, and that you're someone... And like the thing is, I think it's important to remember that maybe kids don't want to talk to their parents about sex, and I think it's like... it's like I used to be like... No, and I think it's can be a complicated conversation for you to have, and I'm sure it's complicated for them, it's complicated for you for different reasons, and I think it's like just making sure that they know that like if they need to bring anything to you, they can. And I think it's making sure that conversations around sex don't feel taboo in your house, making sure that it's a sex positive space, and that like just the language around sex in the house is open. I
mean, going off from that language, making sure you're using the right terminology instead of saying, I think the biggest thing for me and for children especially is that don't refer to your vulva and your vagina as your downstairs. So make sure you're using the right terminology from a very young age.
Say it with your chest.
Yeah, so when they do have problems, they understand this part of me hurts, my vulva hurts, or my vagina hurts, or my uterus hurts. Is making sure we're using that language from a young age. Then like, oh, my privates. No. It's your vagina, it's your vulva.
The amount of names there are, like nunny, fanny, fairy, like all of it, like foo-foo, all to avoid it. I'm like, come on, vulva, we can say it, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
I didn't even know it's called vulva till last year. Like, I had to research because like, we're all calling it vaginas and it's a vulva.
But that's really normal. And how interesting is that? Like, the only people that people can name is the bit that serves the patriarchy. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Male gaze.
Yeah, male gaze, baby.
Yeah. Well, I think you answered that perfectly. I didn't need to add on to that. Any more questions? Yes.
I got a bit of a cold, so it's actually helpful. I was wondering, because you had so much time to like self-discover and build that confidence. Of course, we're always growing and self-developing and learning more about each other. Is there any part of your sexuality of yourself that kind of combines into it that you're still developing and then you're still like not so fully confident to talk about or to have a certain stand on? Like
Completely. I mean, to be honest, talking about all of it makes me a bit, because it's vulnerable, you know? And I think it's important when having any of these conversations to be like, these conversations aren't easy to have. And though I'm up here talking, you know, confidence is very easy to fake. And I think, like, you know, my bisexual identity is something I really struggle with, and it's something that I don't feel confident in a lot of the time and feel not bi enough or like a fraud. And
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like I'm with a man right now, and that is complicated because I'm like, well, I'm still bisexual, but where does that come into, you know, how does that fit into my daily life?
yeah.
So that.
Yeah, I mean, going on from that, I think for me, I'm going to go a little bit more like in depth here.
Dive in.
So for me, I had a conversation with a friend recently who's a lesbian, and she said to me, I feel like I'm less of a lesbian because I don't want to go down on my girlfriends. I don't want to lick their vagina. And I thought to myself, do you know, that's really interesting. That's a really interesting conversation, because that's self-discovery. That's admitting and that's acknowledging that you're kind of breaking down these barriers and these expectations that are part of your sexuality that make you feel like you're less of that person, or you're less of putting yourself in a certain box because I don't want to do this. And that sat with me for a very long time because of me being pansexual, and I felt, you know, I don't really like doing that. I don't really like doing it on a penis either. Does that make me less of a lover? Does that make me less of a lesbian, or whatever you want to call it? And it's really,
as long as you're turning up for someone else's pleasure and doing what you can, it doesn't matter how you get them there, as long as you do, you know? And I think, but it's such an interesting one. And I think it's hard because I think there's just so much shame around sex in general and acts of sex, and how it's so interesting to hear the reverse of it, of like how doing it or not doing it can make you feel a certain way.
Yeah, and it's the same with, I'm with a man, it makes me feel confused about my bisexuality, or I've never been with a woman, am I really bi? And it's like, we need to remember that it doesn't matter if you've been with a woman or not, your sexuality is valid regardless of who you've been with or who you are going to be with in the future. If you feel a certain way, then that's enough.
Yeah, your feelings are valid. Your feelings are always valid.
You don't need to prove it to yourself. You don't need to prove it to anybody else's. If you feel it, that is enough.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Anyone brave enough? No? Okay. Well, if you have any questions, you can obviously come up and ask us. If it's personal, private, I don't mind. I'm sure you don't either.
I can do a bit. I'll see what I can do.
Well, thank you so much for coming, and I hope you had a lovely evening. Thank you.